When we eat the vegetable oils, those unstable fatty acids get stored in our body fat, which sits there right under our skin. So when we go out and we get a sunburn and we have pale skin, then that means those UV rays are just going to penetrate and they're going to hit those polyunsaturates. And you know how cooking oil bottles are often dark? It's to protect it from UV light because that will cause free radicals and it'll damage the oil, make it oxidize. The same thing happens in our skin as in a light bottle. It oxidizes, and when it oxidizes, it triggers that inflammatory response. And what does that do? It makes our skin red and stingy and painful, and it will contribute to a burning effect because free radicals can actually burn our skin the same way radiation can. So when you get the seed oils out of your body, you're stopping a whole rash of horrible things from happening. And it probably will really help to, reduce if you have melanoma in your family.
Hi friends, in this week's episode, I welcome back Dr. Cate Shanahan to the show. She is the author of many best-selling books, including Deep Nutrition, which really informed the way that I raise my children and feed them, and just fascinating research that she had in that book, all about how food influences our jawline and our bite and things like that, and also the risks of inflammation-inducing foods like vegetable oils. And today she is back to talk about her brand new book, Dark Calories: How Vegetable Oils Destroy Our Health and How We Can Get It Back. And Dr. Cate is all about finding the root cause. And in this interview, we talk about the root cause of cardiovascular disease. We talk about oxidative stress and its effects on aging, and why vegetable oils are the root cause of major oxidative stress in the body, and how this can be linked with inflammation and damage to the arteries. This is a really interesting episode. We couldn't touch on everything in the book. The book is fantastic. I highly recommend you go and get a copy. It has lots of diagrams and things to really explain what are complicated concepts, but really to make them simple and translatable. So without further delay, let me now welcome back Dr. Cate Shanahan. So Dr. Cate Shanahan, it is such a pleasure to have you back on the show. I loved our last conversation some time ago now, and I know my listeners did too. So firstly, very warm welcome back to the show.
Well, thank you very much for having me back. It's been 2 years, awesome. So it feels like it's kind of soon. Time flies when you're writing a book.
Time does fly. So let's kick off, I guess, right? I've loved your work for a number of years. What prompted you to write Dark Calories?
Well, truthfully, the number one thing was that so many people would do what I recommended in my other books, Deep Nutrition and The Fat Burn Fix, and they would feel great, get off medications, lose weight. But then they'd go to the doctor's office and their cholesterol would be up, and they'd be sitting there with a doctor that they trusted who would be telling them, oh no, this is bad. You're doing something wrong. You've got to take drugs or change your diet. And that's the problem. That is a piece of misinformation that I needed to kind of kill once and for all. That's actually the idea that cholesterol causes heart attacks is part of the origin story of the rise of vegetable oils. And so I want to make that connection clear so that people can understand, oh, no wonder my doctor doesn't know what seed oils are and doesn't really seem too firm about, cholesterol, why that causes heart attacks. Because he also says lack of exercise, smoking, obesity, so many things. Now I really understand why I don't need to worry about my cholesterol, no matter how high it goes. And I teach people a little more details than no matter how high. I tell them what to look for too. That's important. So all of that backstory of the link between cholesterol phobia and the rise of vegetable oils is essential to understanding the big picture, that vegetable oils are the one thing in the food supply that is the worst thing. They, more than anything else, are what's making junk food junk. They make healthy food junky and bad for us. They're the reason ultra-processed foods are bad, the main reason. And I need to emphasize that because there are so many other things to worry about in our food, we can kind of get overwhelmed. But so it's important to know what to focus on first. That will get you the most kind of physical rewards. You will feel physically better when you start swapping out these toxic fats for healthy ones. Some people notice it the very first day. And that's the kind of reward and positive feedback that you need to really understand that, yes, this is the right thing that I'm doing for my body. And yes, I want to keep doing it, because honestly, avoiding vegetable oils is difficult because the whole world wants to feed us vegetable oils, don't they? Like, I'm sure
Yeah,
you figured that out.
absolutely. Yeah, it's a real challenge. And especially like, when you're a parent and you've got children and they're eating in different places as well, it's a real challenge. I want to come on to the vegetable oils in just a moment. You mentioned cholesterol there, and I'd like to just really get your opinion from all the research and everything you've done and the work that you share, just so that people can understand this better, because it's an area that's really given a lot of attention to still, right? Even on social media, on articles. Dr. Peter Attia talks about it a lot in his book, Outlive, and different markers. And so, from my understanding from the reading is that we have HDL and LDL, which are kind of transporters, if you like. And then people have been looking at very low density lipoproteins, right? But also now a new marker, ApoB. And there are some doctors that seem to be still very pro statins. Could you just explain for people listening? Because I think it can be really unnerving for people, right? They're worried about these things, particularly as they move through their 40s, 50s and beyond.
Yes.
What each of these things mean and what the implications are for our health, please.
Yeah, so the science has become overly complicated. And I like to make things as simple as possible and no simpler, like Einstein said. I think that's how he came up with E equals MC squared or something like that. But so it's very important to understand root causes. That is the only way we're ever going to be able to get to the root cause of cardiovascular disease. If we don't understand root causes, it's hopeless. And so chapter 2 of Dark Calories explains that the root cause is this state of chemical imbalance called oxidative stress. Oxidative stress is the thing that kills us all. And I tell this fascinating story about how a doctor in the 1950s discovered why we die, right? Because that wasn't answered. We didn't know the answer. What actually kills us? And he figured it out. His name was Denham Harmon, and he figured out the answer was free radicals, which are very related to oxidative stress. Oxidative stress causes free radicals to form, and free radicals can cause oxidative stress. It's like fire, right? Fire. A spark starts a fire, and little fires can start more spikes. So that's how oxidative stress and free radicals are related. They feed on each other. And that's what kills us. And it comes down to oxygen being out of control in our body. And he launched the field of longevity science, which relies on trying to use antioxidants to slow the aging process and try to use other techniques to slow the aging process. And he was right. That is what kills us. But the problem is he wasn't able to, and nobody has since been able to find antioxidants that slow the aging process. And these aging processes are not just what kills us, they also cause all these diseases. So oxidative stress is the root cause of heart attacks. It's the root cause of diabetes. It's the root cause of dementia. When I, as a medical doctor, a family medical doctor, started looking at root causes of even basic things like hypertension and kidney disease, right? Is another big risk factor is high blood pressure. I just kept finding that the answer was oxidative stress in our cells. You have to understand what's going on in your cells if you want to understand the root cause of diseases, because they start at the cellular level. So I did all this back work and leg work. And that's where I became convinced that the medical community was really missing an opportunity and just overlooking how easy it could be to reduce these diseases by cutting out vegetable oils because they promote oxidative stress. So oxidative stress is the thing that causes arteriosclerosis. And maybe to make it a little more concrete, let's get back to those particles you mentioned, LDL and HDL. So those are basically little blobs of fat and protein that float through our bloodstream to distribute fat, cholesterol, and other fatty nutrients to our brain, to our blood vessels. They need nutrition too, to our various organs and stuff. They're distributing vehicles. They're like amphibious vehicles that float around in our bloodstream. And their job is to make stops and deliveries like a FedEx truck. And they can get damaged by oxidation, you see. So that's why oxidation is the root cause of cardiovascular disease, because when those things are damaged, they can't make their deliveries properly. Cells don't recognize them. They crash and burn on the edges of our arteries, or they enter the arteries and then they will oxidize and start building up fatty streaks. So it's a whole different kind of process than what has been envisioned so far. What the key mistake in what has been envisioned so far is they've decided that LDL particles are just bad, and that LDL should not be in our bloodstream because LDL can sometimes become small and somehow end up in our arteries where they will then oxidize. So they've got it backwards. They've got it all wrong. And that's why so many people have different ideas, because it's like blind men looking at the proverbial elephant. They don't see the big picture, right? So some people say it's LP little a. Some people say it's small, dense LDL. Some people say it's low HDL and high triglycerides. Well, there's a little bit of truth in all of that, but none of it is really the big picture. It's the elephant in the room is the vegetable oils are making our amphibious vehicles, all of our lipoproteins will oxidize, and then we're in trouble because they're toxic. They harm our arteries, they promote inflammation, and we start developing arteriosclerosis in all of our arteries, our heart, our legs, and our brain. And we can get heart attacks, we can get strokes, we can get peripheral vascular disease and need amputations. So the root cause is oxidative stress, and vegetable oils promote oxidative stress more strongly than anything else in the food supply. But a lot of people don't understand what I mean when I say oxidative stress. Does that make any sense? Is that term like intuitive, do you think, or should I explain it a little more?
I think it would be really helpful actually if you do explain it, because I think people hear about it, but they don't necessarily understand really what's happening.
It's kind of like chaos, really. It's atomic level chaos, or static, or just like, I guess I'll try and make an analogy. Oxidative stress forms when we've got oxygen out of control in our cells, especially our mitochondria. So if you have a car, the mitochondria are the engines of a car, of our body, right? Like the car, there's the actual engine in there. And that engine in our car burns gasoline. And the mitochondria can burn a variety of fuels, but they can burn sugar and they can burn different types of fatty acids. But if they burn the wrong type of fuel, that will produce kind of cellular smog, just the same way as if you put the wrong type of fuel in an engine, it will produce like black smoke instead of forward motion. You'll get more heat in the engine, you'll get more pollution, and you won't go as far on the miles per gallon side if you just put the wrong kind of fuel in your car. When we're eating vegetable oils, we're putting the wrong kind of fuel in our mitochondria, and that's really one of the places where a lot of this oxidative stress begins. And then it affects antioxidants in ways that can later on affect our lipoproteins. But the worst place where we develop the most oxidative stress is in our cellular mitochondria that are trying to generate energy for our cells. And we're feeding them this wrong fuel, the polyunsaturated fatty acids and vegetable oils. And they can't handle it. We don't get energy. They start leaking free radicals. and it's like a whole bunch of smog. So instead of being on a highway where the cars are all going, smoothly, they're all going at the speed limit. They can see each other physically on the highway and interact. Imagine you're on the highway now where every single car is just chuffing out black smoke. Some of them are going too slow and getting in the way and causing accidents. It's a disaster. And so it's that kind of just chaos that oxidative stress causes, and it persists until our bodies get it under control. And it makes it very difficult to get under control when we have vegetable oils. So we have to kind of understand this imaginary little cellular world to really understand just nothing can work right when our bodies are full of vegetable oils and oxidative stress. So is that helping a little bit to clear it up, or tell me what you probably have some questions?
Yeah, no, it is. Absolutely. Thank you. And my understanding as well for many of the listeners of this podcast are women sort of either sort of perimenopausal women or postmenopausal, is that oxidative stress increases around that age. And as you were saying, there's a kind of double feedback mechanism almost, right? You get into this vicious cycle with free radicals and oxidative stress. But also there are higher levels of inflammation, which these vegetable oils also cause. Just coming back then to what you were saying around, LDL, HDL, like VLDL, lipoprotein A, which I understand has a genetic determinism. I think it can feel disempowering, right? Because people get caught up on what are my levels. Yeah. It sounds like what you're saying is less attention needs to be paid to what the levels are and more attention paid to whether there is oxidative stress and inflammation in the body. And the biggest source of that is vegetables.
Correct. And as far as the levels go, when you have oxidative stress, that is what reduces your good cholesterol, causes low density lipoproteins to become small and dense and that more atherogenic type, and can even promote that Lp(a). I've seen people change their Lp(a), which is not truly genetic. There might be genetic, tendencies, but you can actually drastically change that. So it's oxidative stress that drives some of these numbers that we've associated with cardiovascular disease. But those abnormalities are not the root cause. It's the oxidative stress that changes the way these lipoproteins function in our body, and then therefore changes the levels of these lipoproteins. That's why it's the root cause. And oxidative stress is caused really by two things. One is toxicity and the other is nutrient deficiency. So when it comes to vegetable oils, they're a 1-2 punch because they have almost no nutrition in them compared to healthy traditional fats. And vegetable oils are capable of deteriorating into toxins. And many will contain toxins off the shelf. When you cook with them, more toxins will deteriorate as you're cooking. The fatty acids deteriorate and become toxic, right? And so it's an active, dynamic process. And that's why so many people are not getting the story quite right. And they're saying that vegetable oils are maybe not so toxic because they're overlooking all these other complex chemistry pieces that I've just touched on, and that they can't see the full big picture just because it's a complicated big picture. And medicine is not interested in root causes. Medicine looks at risk factors. And so HDL and LDL and triglycerides, those are risk factors. So is blood pressure. It's a risk factor. So is high blood sugar. That's a risk factor. So is age. But all of those things are either driven by oxidative stress or kind of promote oxidative stress. As we age, we've accumulated oxidative stress-induced damage in our bodies. That is aging, right? That's what Denham Harmon said back in the 1950s when he discovered why we die. And that was all correct. But what he was missing was that it's not like we can take a supplement or a bunch of antioxidants and slow down aging. The easy thing is to stop eating the foods that are accelerating aging. That's what's really making us sick and killing us before our time. If all goes well, people can live between 80, 100, 120, maybe even years if all goes well, if we've got a really good diet, good genetics. But the good diet part comes down to being able to control oxidative stress. We have to have the right nutrition, and we have to not eat toxins or consume toxins, the worst of the worst being vegetable oils.
So let's dive into that, because I think that's really important. So if we start with the vegetable oils, I know you detail this in the book, but for people listening, what oils should we be avoiding?
Yeah, so even that is a controversial question because different people will have different lists. Some people just say, well, if it's a seed, you have to avoid it. So they include peanuts and they include sesame seeds. But it's not just that. It's not like a simple rule like that. It actually has to do with several factors, the two biggest being their fatty acid profile. And if they're high in the unstable polyunsaturates and low in stable saturated fat, that's bad. And then it has to do with how they are manufactured, which includes how oily are they to begin with, which has to do with whether we've bred them for a long time or not. So based on those factors, I've come down to a list of 8 that we need to avoid because they're toxic. So there's 3 C's in the USA: corn, canola, cottonseed. And canola is actually the same as rapeseed. So I think over there it's rapeseed, CRC.
Yeah, we
So
call it rapeseed.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And then 3 S's: soy, sunflower, safflower. So these are all highly refined, didn't exist before the industrial era. And those 6 are the ones you're going to see on ingredients labels and products that you buy. Then there's 2 more that are really right now mostly in restaurants only. And that's rice bran and grapeseed oil. Rice bran oil and grapeseed oil. So those are the 8, the total that now people in America are getting an average of 30% of their total daily calories from just those 8 oils, all of which are nearly devoid in any sort of nutrition and may contain toxins just off the shelf, but certainly when you cook with them will make your food toxic because this active process of oxidation creates toxins that weren't there to begin with. And I think that's what a lot of people are missing that are like debunking this as some sort of internet meme theory, right? They don't understand that these polyunsaturates deteriorate into toxins. When you cook with them or when your diet is not healthy, they will deteriorate in your own cell membranes and cause oxidative stress there. That is what's missing right now from the understanding. And that's what the people who are saying, oh, they're not that bad. That's what they're missing. And that's a lot to miss because that is like really the main thing.
That's super important because, I mean, as you were saying, I've certainly seen a lot of people coming out on the other side of the equation now, and it's gaining traction on platforms like Instagram where they're saying they're really not that bad. And I think also the consumer finds it difficult, right? Because they're labeled in a way that would encourage you to buy them. So, for example, organic, cold pressed rapeseed oil is very common here in the UK, and it will say rich in omega-3. And setting aside whether there were certain things like hexanes, I don't know if you can in organic, or what was used in the processing of that. You can't. Okay. What you're saying is independent of any processing, actually, when it goes inside the body, they're highly susceptible to oxidative stress within the body, right? So even if we can get them intact in a form that's okay, they can still wreak havoc inside the body.
If we eat too much of them, yes.
If we eat too much of them, okay.
Yeah, so this is where like a lot of people ask, oh, okay, so does that mean soybeans are not good or sunflower seeds are not good? And the answer there is no, because when we eat them that way, they do still have all the antioxidants and the nutrition. It's the whole food intact. Nature protects those polyunsaturated fatty acids with tons of antioxidants. And the problem is that our industrial refining destroys those natural antioxidants. So the processing does matter. And that organic cold pressed canola oil has been the same destruction. The only difference is they don't use hexane. But in order to get the oil out of the seed, the processing of all those 8 oils is extremely harsh and detrimental. The temperatures go up to 600 degrees several times. And I forget if that's
So if
600
they're saying
degrees.
cold pressed, it's not genuinely cold pressed?
That's correct. It is not genuinely cold pressed. That's like a
Okay.
meaningless term, cold pressed,
Okay.
except for in olive oil. In the olive oil industry, they actually do have standards. But in the canola oil industry, what cold pressed means is expeller pressed, that they did not use hexane. It means as opposed to hexane.
Okay.
And it still was heated to 600 degrees. There was still tons of pressure. And that's just in the prep work to get it to the point where it can go through the expeller, right? So there's a lot more going on in the factory. It's not like just some nice factory worker sitting there with a screw press slowly making the oil. This is huge vats and pressure cookers and steam and yards and miles of yards of metal and just like moving from here to there really quick to get every last drop of oil out of the seeds. They preheat it basically many times. And the crude oil extracted by that expeller press is inedible. It is toxic. It has to go through numerous refining steps. It has to be de-waxed. It has to be degummed, it has to be bleached, it has to be deodorized, it has to be winterized. Lots of things have to happen to get out all of those byproducts. When you heat those oils, it creates basically a chemical mess, just a stinky soup of oil mixed with the other things that were there in the seed. And it's a thick and dark brown, stench reeking soup that they can still call organic, even though it's toxic to consume, because they didn't add the toxins. They didn't add hexane. Those toxins developed as part of the processing. It's called a process contaminant. And no matter how toxic the process contaminants are or how many there are, it can still be called organic. So do you see the problem?
I do. And actually, after I do see the problem, and after our last conversation 2 years ago, it's interesting. My eldest son, who's now 16, I was explaining this to him afterwards. And he then Googled it and watched a YouTube video on this processing. And he was so disgusted. He has never been near a vegetable oil again because, I'm grateful that you are sharing all of this. I think also inherently when you look at these things, right, you don't suddenly oil doesn't just start squeezing itself out of a sunflower seed in the same way it does when you grab hold of an olive, right? It just comes out. You can press it out. What about things like when we look at omega-6-3 ratio? And there's tests you can run, the omega quant index. People who are having more things like, I guess, like when we look at almonds, for example, versus almond milk, people are turning to these things. How should we be approaching that?
So almond milk doesn't really have a lot of either omega-6 or omega-3. Is that related to the question, or is that a separate question?
It was slightly just linked to it because I think people will go for whole foods as much as they can, right? But some people I know will be concerned when they listen or thinking, what about getting this ratio right? Am I having too many omega-6s through things like nuts and seeds? And I know these are also omega-6s and omega-3s are both essential, but related to that, and which you've just cleared up, is whether it's problematic when you're having things like almond milk, for example. So people who don't have dairy and want to make, for example, some oats with almond milk.
Yeah, so almond milk is actually the best non-dairy milk. And almonds are fairly high in just monounsaturated fat, and they have a little bit of the polyunsaturated fatty acids. But let's get back to that omega-6-3 ratio, because I want to make a very important point. The ratio is definitely not the problem. And yes, it's imbalanced. And yes, because of that imbalance, we get specific issues in certain circumstances, right? Like it might promote some blood clotting. It might tend to promote more painful periods. There are some specific issues that we get. But let's say we had the flipped problem. If we had more omega-3 than omega-6, that would be worse because omega-3s are far more unstable than omega-6, and they would be causing more oxidative stress. So in the book, I talk about something called the double bond principle, and this helps understand the big picture a lot better. And it has to do with the fact that double bonds react with oxygen. That's what's the problem here. And omega-3 fatty acids have more double bonds. The linoleic and linoletic acids that are in the seeds have, omega-3s actually have more double bonds. So like canola oil, which is supposedly heart healthy, that is actually more prone to oxidizing than, say, like a sunflower oil, which has the omega-6s, because it has more double bonds. So some of these chemical principles will make a lot more sense, when you actually look at it, and I have pictures and illustrations in the book. But it's the fundamental chemical principles are how I sorted it all out. And that's what I always go back to when I'm answering these questions. And once, really, you don't need to know the chemistry. You just need to kind of follow the train of thought long enough to say, oh yeah, okay, that does make sense to me. Or maybe if it doesn't make sense, then just dismiss my whole argument. But I hope it makes sense. Most people have read it say it makes sense. And then, then you can kind of just remember, yeah, it's oxidative stress, and all vegetable oils, doesn't matter about the ratio. We don't really need to check the ratio if we don't want to. Our bodies don't need very much omega-3. It turns out there was actually a study done at the National Institute of Health. And they did a study on, they had two groups, and in one group, they fed them low omega-6 and omega-3. And the other group, they fed them high omega-6 and omega-3, but it was the same amount of omega-3 in both groups. And the group that got the low omega-6 had plenty of omega-3 compared to the group that got the same amount of omega-3, but more omega-6. And what's going on there? It's this fire analogy. There's too much unsaturates, and it kind of just starts fires, and it will burn those omega-3s. So you lose omega-3s too, right? Because of the oxidative stress, not because of any ratio or enzymes or things like you might hear a lot of folks talk about. And that is just absolutely not the problem. It is a small part of the problem, but it's a completely different concept altogether. The body regulates that, and it doesn't affect most people.
Interesting. So when you're looking at omega-3s, I mean, I is very aware, like if people are supplementing with omega-3, and that is like, it smells, it's oxidized, it's in a plastic bottle, it's been exposed to light, right? It feels, and I think is more risky, in fact, to take that. However,
That's why people got fish oil burps. Remember that? Like a lot of people have fish oil burps. Yeah,
people used to, and they say I can't take them because I get
yeah.
It's
irritating their esophagus. It's irritating their esophagus and giving them gastritis because that oxidation is happening and starting to cause inflammation in their upper digestive system. And so, so fish oils that don't do that, well, fish oils in capsules won't necessarily do that, right? Because they'll take it down farther into your system and you might not notice it, but it's still a problem.
So are you saying then that fish omega-3 capsules, are they safe to take or not? I mean, there are many.
Depends.
Okay, it depends. Can we clarify that? I know there are individuals and scientists. I know Dr. Rhonda Patrick, for example, is a proponent of high levels of DHA and in EPA. I think many people are going to feel quite confused. Can you clear this up for us in terms of omega-3?
Well, this confusion is totally appropriate because the treatment that you need depends on your individual status. So if I was going to sit here and say everybody needs DHEA, that would be bad medicine because not everybody has the same issues. Not everybody has the same genetics and processes these oils the same way. Some people will benefit from DHEA supplements, which is different than the types of omega-3 in canola, right? So there's just so much of the chemistry is completely ignored by a lot of the people in the space making advice. Okay, I'm just going to say that. It's just, they're not chemists. They don't know the molecules. They can't draw them on a chalkboard. They just don't know the difference, and they don't know how the liver or the body processes them. A lot of missing pieces here. So that's why there's so much confusion. And this is part of the noise machine. This is just part of what makes the whole conversation confusing to people, and people will give up. You need to listen to people who get to root causes. And that's me. That's why I keep talking about root causes, because I have a orderly principle of answering questions. I don't just give everybody the same answer, because everybody is different. That would be like saying, what should I take for a headache? Well, if your headache is a migraine, I'm going to give you a different answer than if your headache happened because you sit in front of a computer and you're tense all day, or you just banged your head into a wall. The answers are different depending on the cause. And so if your DHEA levels are low and you can't eat fish, then maybe I would say, go ahead and have a supplement. But it's not just going to be any supplement. You have to get the supplements that pay attention to what? To oxidation. Oxidation is really the key to understanding health and all health principles. Why? Because oxidation is what kills us. Oxidative stress is what makes us sick and die before our time. So everything has to be conceptualized in terms of, does it cause or alleviate oxidative stress? And when it comes to the processing of things like fish oils, the good companies will talk about that. They will say, we take steps to control oxidation reactions. We do XYZ, and we do batch testing, and it's more expensive because we're going to have a lower yield because of this higher quality. It's the only way you can get higher quality. And then the other factors is, once you've bought it, it can still keep oxidizing, right? So you want to use it up quickly. Pay attention to that expiration date. So that's why folks out there are hearing conflicting information, because the truth is, someone can come along and say, yes, everybody should take DHEA. But then somebody who looks at the other side of the elephant can say, well, DHEA supplements don't do anything for most people. The research shows that they help some people with dry eye. They can help lower your triglyceride levels. They may help with a few other conditions. But the bulk of the research says they don't help most people. And some research shows they increase bleeding disorders and increase something called sudden cardiac death, right? So that is, both of those things are true. So when someone comes along and just gives a blanket recommendation without qualifications, they're going to have naysayers. They're going to invite the naysayers into the room and say, well, wait a second, that doesn't jive with this science over here. But and it confuses people, because someone's saying an elephant is a snake and someone's saying an elephant is a tree trunk. You know that analogy? They're feeling, the blind men feeling the different parts of the elephant. One person feeling the trunk says it's a snake, or maybe he feels the tail. I don't remember. And another person feeling the leg says it's a tree. So what I'm saying is it's an elephant. And the elephant in the room is vegetable oils promote oxidative stress.
And so how do we know, when we're talking about oxidative stress, when we're talking about whether we need more DHA, how do we know what our levels are? What should we be thinking about to establish a baseline of our health? Listening to this, it seems it's quite clear, and from the book, which is very helpful. And I have to say, all the diagrams and everything it is so much has gone into this. Can I say, Dr. Shanahan? It really, really does, and gives people, I think, just such a valuable resource for them to understand it, and people who are not medically trained to actually, as you say, really understand the mechanics of this and the science and the chemistry behind it. But what should people listening to this, number one, going by the book, number two, what should they be doing to assess their current levels, right? They want to take out these vegetable oils, but also assessing and looking at, okay, what level of oxidative stress do I have? Where might I need some more of these? How can they establish that baseline assessment?
Yes, it's very easy to do. And thank you so much for saying those nice things, because that is actually why I wrote the book. I really wanted people who don't have any medical training whatsoever to be able to get these core concepts and understand that the whole conversation needs to shift to oxidative stress. And what we've been talking about is just tips of the iceberg. So to understand like what your degree of oxidative stress, very simple. All of the risk factors that your doctor will talk to you about are signs of some sort of oxidative stress if you have them. So if your blood pressure is high, if a high blood pressure is now anything over like 125 over 75, depending on who you ask, certainly 130 over 80, that's a kind of a borderline blood pressure. And that is driven by oxidative stress. So if you have high pressures, maybe not all the time, maybe only when you're at the doctor's office and when you're, anxious, but when you're relaxed, your blood pressure is normal, still, that's a sign that stress in your body, emotional stress, is generating too much oxidative stress, and it affects your kidneys, and they raise your blood pressure to try and protect themselves from oxidative stress. It's a defense mechanism. It's not a disease. Okay, so that's one sign. And another sign is, well, is your fasting blood sugar elevated? And this is a very, very important common issue. Fasting blood pressure being over 90 is elevated, but our labs won't anymore tell you that's abnormal. They used to. When I first went into medicine, 85 was the cutoff. Now it's 100. Because our entire population has changed. Our entire population is subject to too much oxidative stress. And because of that, we need more sugar in the bloodstream than our bloodstream can safely carry. And we have become insulin resistant. And so this leads me to another way to tell if you have oxidative stress. And this is like the most personal and probably the best way, the most important one. You don't even need a doctor for this. You don't need a blood test. You just need to ask yourself this question. How do you feel when you're hungry? Do you feel hypoglycemic? Do you feel like your blood sugar is dropping? Do you feel like you get a headache or brain fog? Do you get hangry? Do you get shaky and anxious? Those are signs of insulin resistance, which comes from oxidative stress. And that is such an important, there's actually 11 symptoms of low blood sugar, which really even happen when your blood sugar is high, sometimes because of oxidative stress being that bad. But those 11 symptoms, I have a table in there so that you can learn to look for them. And it's very, very important to look for them before you eat something. Like if you're feeling hungry and you have any one of those symptoms, well, that's a sign that you are actually probably insulin resistant. And doctors don't know what a normal insulin level is, so we don't test for it correctly.
And what can we do about it? How can we improve removing vegetable oils? What are the other ways that we can limit oxidative stress? Is it eating lots of foods that are rich in polyphenols and antioxidants? What can we do actively?
Yes, that's part of it. We can eat things that will help us control oxidative stress. And one of the most important set of equipment our body has to fight oxidative stress are enzyme systems. These enzyme systems are made of protein, so we need to get plenty of protein. They are made of vitamins and minerals, so we need to make sure we have vitamins and minerals. And they fight off oxidation in a way that antioxidants and things like blueberries can't do, right? So antioxidants in things like blueberries, and what's your favorite thing to talk about for antioxidants?
I mean, I love all the berries. Like they're probably one of my favorites for sure.
So all those berries will protect your oxidation from happening in your gut. Like if you cook with foods that are rich in antioxidants, it protects the food. It protects the polyunsaturates from the food from oxidizing. It protects all the things in food from oxidizing, because it's not just vegetable oils. They're just the worst. Proteins can oxidize, vitamins can oxidize. But if you have like these polyphenols and other phytonutrients that you get from cooking with vegetables and herbs and spices and some fruits, then that protects all the goodies in the meal that you're making. And then it continues to protect them in your digestive tract, but it doesn't protect them in your bloodstream. All right, they don't really have much of a function in our bloodstream. So what we need for our bloodstream and what we need for our food are two separate things. And so I teach you about that in the book. It's just important to understand that so that you know, like, okay, well, if polyphenols really only help your food, then you can answer the question, should I take a supplement of polyphenols like in a pill? Well, it's not going to help while you're cooking. It might help if you eat something, maybe. But if you're eating foods that have polyphenols, it's not going to do much beyond what the foods are already going to do, most likely, in my opinion.
So actually getting it all naturally from food is the answer.
Absolutely.
You mentioned there protein, which I did want to speak to you about. So I'm definitely a big advocate of eating higher protein. The blue zones, which massive traction on this. You wrote a very compelling article in relation to this. I think people get really, really confused that they don't seem to have a higher protein diet, that it was kind of occasional, and this idea that ancestrally we wouldn't have had access and we would have been foraging and occasionally we'd have killed an animal and then we would have all enjoyed it, but that wasn't protein. And people get very anxious often actually about eating a lot of protein. What are your thoughts? And more than your thoughts, right? What's the science there?
Well, the science there, let's say the science begins with the Seventh-day Adventist Bible at the end of the 1800s, because the Blue Zones was paid for by the Seventh-day Adventist Church. And the Seventh-day Adventists have some very important beliefs, which are correct, which is that what we eat matters, and it's very important. But it's just that the detail of what their Bible says to eat is not based on any science. It's just based on those folks' idea of what, is a righteous kind of diet. And it's also another important connection between the temperance movement, no alcohol, no sex before marriage, between that movement and the Seventh Adventist Church. Seventh-day Adventist Church. Boy, that's a mouthful. So those kind of concepts also include not much fat, like not much indulgence. You don't want to eat food for pleasure. It's just a mechanical function. So if it tastes good, maybe it's bad. Like that's where that kind of science comes from, which is to say it is not science. It's somebody's hypothesis at best, or just somebody's idea, really, as something they could have thought up, out fishing one day. It doesn't give it any scientific validity. Now, the reason we think there's scientific validity is because of things like the Seventh Adventist, that church that I can't get the name straight, pays.
Is it the Seventh-day Adventist?
Yes, thank you. The ones that have the Adventist hospitals all over the place. Yeah. They have created a large body of supposed science, but it's really propaganda because they paid for it. And that's why it's important to know what the people in the Blue Zones really ate versus what is emphasized about what they ate. And if you want to link to my article, I point out the contradictions that are in that very book. And it's kind of like even a testimony to the author who wrote that book, to not fully give in to like the benefactors who were paying for his trips and delete out everything that goes against their message. But like for one example that's in the article, he talks about a guy in Costa Rica going to get 2 liters full of lard for their cooking for the week. And then in the summary at the end of the book, at the end of that chapter, they give summaries on what are the key points of what people do in Costa Rica that makes them live so long. Well, they don't mention the lard anywhere. They mention beans, and they mention like laughing a lot and being outside. But they don't mention a lot of the stuff that the author reported on, like seeing them have eggs for breakfast every day, doing a ton of cheese, and having some sort of dairy in just about every meal. Like that is edited, censored from the summary, and that is censored from the website on the Blue Zones, and it's not in the Seventh-day Adventist hospital recommendations or this other huge and important organization that educates doctors called the American College, ACLM, of Lifestyle Medicine. They don't disclose that they are a religious organization, but they are. And they align their recommendations with the Seventh-day Adventist Church that has, their heart's in the right place. Food matters. Food is important. And a lot of other religions don't emphasize that. So I can see why people might sign up for this sort of religion. But the problem is there's no science. It was, anybody, you could just ask any man on the street. They'd come up with a similar concepts, right? Don't eat junk food. They also don't smoke. And they don't drink alcohol, certainly not in excess. So smoking and alcohol in excess kill a lot of people. So when you don't do that, your religious group is going to live longer than average just because of that. So there's a lot more to it than what they really disclose.
And what about in relation to eating animal protein? You've mentioned dairy. Like, there's plenty of people that will say dairy is inflammatory, right? It's just such a minefield for people. Certainly after reading Deep Nutrition, which came at a very timely time for me, raising my children, I read everything you were saying around jaw structure and development and teeth development, and the need to kind of counter like the methionine and things that's from meat with the glycine and having bone broth. And my kids have had meat on the bone and all these things. And I have to say, as teenagers, they've got lovely teeth and nice jaws, and they breathe through their nose and they sleep well at night. So I'm grateful to you for that. Some people listening to this, they may be eating a vegetarian or vegan diet, and they may be, or some people are just actually now really worried about eating too many animal products, eating too much saturated fat and things. Can you explain a little bit more around that?
Well, yeah. So let's talk about it in terms of oxidative stress. Does animal protein cause oxidative stress? No. There's absolutely zero evidence of that. Animal protein is full of building blocks called amino acids. We need those. Our bodies, everything you're looking at, my hair is protein made out of amino acids. My skin, the whites of our eyes, the red stuff in our lips, protein. Our nails, protein. So protein does not cause oxidative stress. Now, an imbalance might, like if we're eating so much protein that we don't get other nutrients. So we need to know what a balance is, what is a good balance. And I provide that information as well in all of my books. But yeah, it's about controlling oxidative stress. And so is dairy inflammatory? Well, I'm curious if before you read Deep Nutrition, did you worry that dairy might be inflammatory?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, it had come up more on the hormonal side. Like, it's often associated with, problems, people who have acne, and I've had PCOS and things like that. So for me, it had come up in relation to that in the past.
Correct. Yeah. So there's components in dairy some people can be sensitive to. But that's not the same as it being inflammatory. So something like cigarette smoking is inflammatory. Toxins are inflammatory. How? They promote oxidative stress. They trigger our inflammatory response because the inflammatory response is a response to toxicity. So smog has inflammatory effects because it's toxic. Chemical, like, cleaning agents, those can be inflammatory because they're toxic. They can trigger an inflammatory response. But milk, some people can develop allergies to it. That doesn't mean it's like cats, for example. You can be allergic to a cat. That doesn't mean cats are inflammatory, right? So it's different. When we're talking about an allergy or a sensitivity, that's how your unique body metabolizes something, and often it involves the immune system, and that gets just really unique in that scenario. So there's a lot of components in milk that people can be sensitive to, but it doesn't mean all dairy they need to avoid. Even if you're lactose intolerant, you can often avoid cheese. You can often eat cheese because lactose is just a sugar that if you don't have the enzyme to break it down, it ends up in your colon instead of getting broken down and going into your bloodstream. And it's not really doesn't belong in your colon, so it can cause some bloating, right? That can make people feel like they're inflamed, but they're really not having an inflammatory reaction. They're just a little bloated. And yes, the bloating is a trauma, can promote some inflammation and stuff like that, but it's not because the lactose is toxic. It's because their body doesn't break it down and the whole microbiome is not not geared for having lactose in the colon. So in Dark Calories, I help you kind of figure out which of the components in dairy might be causing your problems, because there's lactose, there's proteins, there's the hormones, certainly, and then there's some component, there's opioids even that can make people very phlegmy. Right. So it's a lot of stuff. It's a very, very nutritious food. And like any complex nutritious food, if our systems are damaged from all sorts of toxicity, we're going to have a hard time processing the more complicated stuff. So that's why very many people have a problem with dairy. It's almost like the more nutritious it is, the more likely people are going to have a problem with it, unfortunately.
It's a shame. I feel like we can only really scratch the surface in this interview. I think people are going to definitely have to go buy Dark Calories, because, as you say, there's just so much in it. Before you go, there is something that I did want to speak to you about. We talked a little bit about it offline, and I think this probably will blow people's minds, is in relation to how seed oils cause sunburn, but also just understanding what that mechanism is it what we're eating, and what about what we're topically putting on our skin as well?
Yeah. So when we eat the vegetable oils, those unstable fatty acids get stored in our body fat, which sits there right under our skin. So when we go out and we get a sunburn and we have pale skin, then that means those UV rays are just going to penetrate and they're going to hit those polyunsaturates. And you know how cooking oil bottles are often dark? It's to protect it from UV light, because that will cause free radicals and it'll damage the oil, make it oxidized. The same thing happens in our skin as in a light bottle. It oxidizes, and when it oxidizes, it triggers that inflammatory response. And what does that do? It makes our skin red and stingy and painful, and it will contribute to a burning effect, because free radicals can actually burn our skin the same way radiation can. So when you get the seed oils out of your body, you're stopping a whole rash of horrible things from happening. And it probably will really help to, reduce, if you have melanoma in your family, it's so important to do that. Because melanoma can occur in places that never see the sun. And that happens because of seed oils too. And people don't want to talk about that. The doctors don't want to talk about that because they can't explain it. Right? People have gotten melanoma on the bottoms of their feet and in their private parts, which don't usually see the sun. In the back of their eyes, there's not a lot of sun back there. And so then you also asked, though, about putting stuff on your skin. It doesn't absorb very much. Like, let's say you put some kind of like some oil that has some polyunsaturates. I would pay attention to the polyunsaturated fatty acid ratios, right? Like coconut is the traditional tropical skin moisturizer. It's totally saturated, very stable. It's just buy coconut oil. That's a great skin moisturizer right there. Maybe cheaper. You can use it with you can have it in your smoothie if you want. But even if you've got some product right now that has, like say soy oil in it, it's not going to get absorbed into your body to any significant degree. Is it good for your skin? I don't think so. But like some of those other components might be good for your skin, right? Like if there's a lot of vitamin E in it, it could be good. But I certainly wouldn't slather it on my skin and go out in the sun, because that could trigger some of those free radical reactions and the damage could spread deeper into your tissues. So, that's my advice on those topicals.
Because it happens a lot as well with like when you look at facial oils, so you might have rosehip oil or like cumin seed oil and things like this. And as you say, they have other benefits. It sounds like applying that at night maybe, but not putting these things on before you're going out in the sun.
Absolutely. You got it.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Amazing. There is so much more, I think, that we could talk about, cooking oils and temperatures, but I know all of this stuff is in the book. And I think the answer is go and buy it. It is so well researched. And as you say, goes direct to the root cause. It's fascinating. Please share, Dr. Kate, where can people find out more about you, the date of release, everything they need to know, really? and
Yeah,
connect
so
with you?
if you're listening to this after June 6th, it's already available, and you can look for more information about it from my website. That's what it'll have. Where my website is drkate.com, which is drcate.com, and there's all kinds of information about the book there. And then once you buy the book, there's a little QR code to additional resources that will help you implement the the ideas in the book, because there's only so much space. You're going to notice there's a lot of pages in that book, and there was only so much space. So there's some more stuff that you can download if you sign up to my newsletter by scanning that QR code in the book once you get the book. But signing up to my newsletter is a great way to stay in touch, because I am going to be putting together many more resources that will help people avoid these oils and understand just, we truly do have to be on the defensive all the time about our health, because there are systems in place that are making money off of our poor health and off of our ignorance about what a really healthy diet is. So I'm trying to put as much support as I personally can together. And so if you sign up to my newsletter, you can access that. And then follow me on Twitter, which is Dr. Kate Shanahan, and Instagram and Facebook, all the same handle, LinkedIn too.
Amazing. We will link to all of that in the show notes. Thank you so much for coming back on the show and sharing all your knowledge.
Thank you so much, Angela. It's been great talking with you.
It's been amazing to have you back.
I hope you got something out of it too.
I did. And thank you. I've had the pleasure of an advanced copy of the book, which is amazing. So thank you. One question, right? I didn't ask you. I don't know if you want to answer this while it's still recording, is can you be healthy on a vegan diet?
Oh yeah, I mean, you can optimize a vegan diet. Absolutely. Would I recommend a vegan diet during pregnancy? Absolutely not. It's just really difficult to get a great balance of nutrients on a vegan diet for that next generation, right? Even like before contraception, it's a little questionable. And I say this because a lot of children of vegans are just physically smaller than their parents at adulthood. And I see that as the body needing to adapt to fewer resources. And, if they're physically smaller, that's kind of like a safety net. And for boys who are small, their lives are just more difficult. So you can't control if you're going to have a boy or a girl, but if you could have a bigger boy, your boy will, statistically speaking, be more likely to get married, be more likely to have a job that he likes, and definitely be paid more, just be more successful in life. So height really matters, especially for men.
And how would you get the protein? Because I know you're not a big advocate of protein powders. How do you get enough protein?
Yeah, it's very difficult. And that's that small, like shrinking down in the next generation is a sign of inadequate protein, because protein is the basic building block for the skeleton, and biology is smart. It senses if there's not enough basic building blocks, it's going to program this person to be small for their entire life, potentially. And that is something that I'm saying this is just theoretically, but I've seen a lot of examples. They haven't done studies to show that, children of vegans don't grow as tall. Why would they want to do those studies? Who would pay for that? Right. But that's what the science would predict. And generally speaking, if the science predicts something, it's what's going to happen. So it's a big red flag there. But it would be very difficult. They'd have to eat a lot of, nuts and seeds and tofu, and because those are the high protein plant-based foods. But those will come along with a lot of polyunsaturates. Could that be bad? Maybe. No one's looking for these particular problems.
And also potentially hard for adults in terms of longevity, right? Because we know that sarcopenia is a real issue.
Absolutely. Right. And frailty, right? Like frailty later in their life. Absolutely. And, not being able to live independently. Yeah. I mean, if you've personally been vegan all your life, then, don't be fooled into thinking that your children are going to have the same potential for health as you. That's like my biggest concern is that next generation that didn't sign up for it, that would be potentially inheriting problems for life. Doesn't seem fair to me.
That's the genetic potential I've heard you talk about. Amazing. Thank you. Really, really appreciate your work. I just want to really express my gratitude for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Angela. It's been a pleasure speaking to someone so knowledgeable, about these very important topics, and you've built them into your family, and that is, that takes leadership because the world doesn't want you to do that.
No.
And I'm glad you're building this network of other people who are doing the same stuff.
Yeah, I think it's just such an important message that you share. And as I say, I've benefited, I've seen my kids grow strong and tall, and I've got strong boys who are tall, and my daughter, she's an athlete, and it's just so nice to see. And I'm really grateful. I remember a time when my middle child couldn't breathe through his nose, and we found out we were in a house that had damp and mold. And that's when I got pneumonia. He wasn't breathing and his bite was coming forward, and we moved and we corrected it, just by moving, he started to breathe again through his mouth, and we were giving the right diet, and his jaw corrected, and it's just miraculous when you see it.
Amazing. Yes, those kinds of stories, they just that's why I do this. It totally warms my heart. So thank you for telling. And those mycotoxins, they promote oxidative stress too, right? So that root cause analysis just helps make everything come more clear, I think.
Yeah, it does. I wish more people would talk about it.
That's why I talk about it.
Yeah, no, and I'm grateful that you do. Well, thank you so much. As I say, we'll let you know when it goes live. If you want the unstripped, just let me know, or we can send you some reels that we've put together, because we'll take sound bites if that's easier, and then we'll send them to you, and then you can pre-approve.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Let's start with that. Absolutely. Yeah. Yes. And I mean, just if there's something I think of later that I said, I was like, oh yeah, then I'll let you know about it if I can remember that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, please do. And we'll include it. Yeah, we want to help you get the message out there, so just let me know.
Thank you. Yeah, so as soon as you have them, I'll start tweeting, because the book doesn't come out till later. Oh, when were you going to release this?
Do you know, Vanessa has the schedule, but sometimes, if there's a date, we can nudge it in. So for example, we are booked 2-3 months in advance, but we can reshuffle, if you want it to come out just before June, or it depends. What would you like time wise?
Yeah, I'd say, just right around that week, June 11th or that week, or, something like that would be totally fantastic.
Sure. We'll do that, and we'll get the reels and stuff ready for then. So we'll be in touch a bit nearer the date.
All right. Beautiful. Well, thank you. Thanks
My
again.
pleasure. Thank you. Take care.
Have a good rest of your day. You too.
And you take care. Bye.